Hello and welcome to the deep dive spoiler-filled discussion video of 2018's Delirium, the one with Topher Grace, not the other one. That one will never be reviewed. I ultimately liked where this movie went with its the game that it was playing throughout, where you weren't sure what was real, you weren't sure what was being imagined by the main character, and I honestly didn't see this one coming. I was of a very binary mindset throughout. I was thinking that either his mind was perfectly healthy and there was this conspiracy of events that was happening to him that was designed to capitalize on a mind that thought it was frail or more frail than it was, or that he was absolutely imagining everything, and I mean everything with a capital E, that he would be waking up in a white room at the mental institution with a therapist and possibly a scale model of the mansion. So the fact that they kind of found a balance between the two where some stuff was happening to him and some really dark, disturbing stuff was happening, as well as him fighting his mind, needing his meds because they did help provide a healthy balance for him and so on. So the combination of the two, I thought, added some good elements to the storyline. As far as the actual ending with the mother being held captive down there, I liked that. My problem with that is I think it didn't go far enough. And by far enough, I mean you have a character whose entire storyline is based on tragedy. And it just felt like they could have gone further with that. And I'm not a big fan of horror movies holding back, and it's not that I mind happy endings. I just don't like happy endings for the sake of needing the audience to leave the theater on a positive note and shoehorning it in. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new segment of self-aggrandizing delusions of grandeur where I pit my imagination against the career filmmakers that have been doing this for decades in a vain attempt of a segment called Here's How I Would Have Done It. So in this case, here's how I would have done it. I would have not made it 3 days into this event. I would have made it 3 weeks into the event. I would have made it so that the deadline for the 30 days was coming up. And I think by doing that, when he goes down underneath the pool and he figures out what's going on in that room and who that person is, this is a character who's defined by the tragedy of him being helpless to do anything, having tragedy unfold in front of his eyes, and then being mentally punished for it. How disturbing would it be, and how much closure would there have been brought to the tragedy of the character? Not to the character himself, definitely. This would not have been great for him. But the closure of the storyline of the character, the circular nature of the plot. If he had been hearing the voice on the phone for 3 weeks, and had been hanging up on it, getting more frustrated, thinking it was his brain playing tricks on him, thinking it was somebody playing tricks on him outside of the house, anything along those lines, and ignoring it, and then finding his mother down there, recently dead of starvation. That would have been dark. I mean, as it was pretty dark, but that would have been dark in a way that would have provided another element to the character where, again, he's presented with an opportunity where he could have done something, possibly, but the odds were stacked against him, and he wound up in an impotent position of watching something unfold, of a tragedy of a loved one, and now he has to face the consequences of that. I think that perhaps that would have been a better element to, better place to take it. And ultimately, the mother died anyway. I just think that would have added, like I said, some finalities to some Shakespearean-esque bookending to the character. So, but moving on, the thing that there's a few things I want to discuss. The binary realities. I think could have been done just a little bit better. And I think here's how. And I think this is kind of, when I gave my technical score, I was mentioning this, is when you have binary realities happening within a movie. I think one thing that really is something that sets a movie apart and a good tool to use when you have an element like this is to give each reality its own feel. And it could be very, very subtle. It could be a different camera angle where, perhaps you're looking to get a character, from the midsection up at that angle, or even further down, above them and down. It could be a color palette thing. It could be a different in the back end sound tones. It could be very, very subtle. But I think when the events that are physically happening have their own look and feel to them, and the events that he's imagining have their own look and feel to them, then I think it separates the two, and the real fun comes into play with messing with the audience with fake outs on that they don't realize the subtleties of the technical issues that are taking place. They don't realize that the camera angle has changed, but at the same time, they also do. It's a subtle thing. It happens in the subconscious where they know that he's imagining things, but if you ask them, you pull them aside and you interview them, they're not going to know how they know it. They just know it. And this is something that a movie that I thought did really well is A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. And, the sequences in the dream world and the sequences in the real world had their own feel to them. And the real fun of that came in the fake outs with that. When a character fell asleep, and they were in the dream world, but it hasn't established that signature look of it yet. You didn't know the character was dreaming. They didn't know they were dreaming. They thought they were still sitting in class with their other classmates. So when weird stuff started happening, it was all the more unnerving. And then, okay, we're in the dream world. So I think that by having that, by establishing that, by making that a part of the audience's subconscious, but still within their realm of knowledge, then you can start to play with it. Then you can start to, have situations where the camera looks like, in this case of Delirium, the camera looks like it is in his imagination. And then all of a sudden, there's a physical consequence that happens. And you realize that, no, this is actually happening. And there were elements like that in this movie, but the two different binary realities didn't have their own look and feel to them. So I think it just didn't have quite as much of that impact that they were going for, where what he thought was going on in his head was actually going on, and now he has to look at the consequences of that. The other thing that I wanted to mention before this deep dive is finished here is how good of a job Patricia Clarkson did as the parole officer. I really thought that having a character that was so hot and cold really added to the element of reality versus insanity for the main character. In one moment she was very crass and, I don't, give an F what happens to you. You're just a rich kid that I would love to put back in jail. On the next part, it's like, oh, you're really suffering here. You know what? Let me go back and get your meds. And then going, just before that, pretty much saying, the whole sexual favor for, leniency thing. And, I'm taking, when turned down, took that pretty horribly. So she was very, I thought it was interesting to have a character in his life that was so critical to the stakes of his success and have her be so unhinged. I thought was a really good element. It kept the stakes hanging on that precipice and teetering. And I really, really liked that. So, major kudos to the screenwriter and the director and Patricia herself for selling that character so well, in my opinion. And while I'm at it, I know I covered this in the review, but I'm going to reinstate it here. I really want to give some major kudos to Topher Grace as well. It isn't easy holding a movie on your own like that. And yes, there were other characters. I already talked about that. But for the most part, it was just him and the house and a swimming pool and what he was fighting with, in his own brain. And I thought that he really sold the performance. It's not an easy job, and I thought that he did it very well. I have never really had an issue with Topher Grace, I would love to see him in some more stuff. You know, could it be that he's in the middle of a Matthew McConaughey-esque renaissance? I don't know. I actually kind of hope so. I think that he is a good actor, and I'd love to see him in some more stuff. So tip of the hat to you, Topher. I think that should about do it. I think I covered most everything that I wanted to with this movie. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you have points that you feel like I missed, I would love to hear from you in any case. Please leave comments down below. I'll be reading them and discussing them and otherwise engaging with them. Lastly, I just want to thank you for making me a part of your day and watching these videos. I really, really do appreciate it. So, until tomorrow.